Dr. Sherri Tenpenny is our guest. Doctor, continuing along the line that you've gotten into about all the evidence showing, pointing towards them releasing something more deadly or knowing it's going to mutate, the CDC report saying it may mutate into something extremely deadly. Continue.
I read a report, I think it was a couple of days ago, and I just skimmed it. I didn't really read at the details of it, but it was talking about the H1N1 morphing into something and being a different subtype. And I thought, well, now, isn't that just interesting? We've just spent $10 billion manufacturing a vaccine by 5 different companies and bottling it all up, and even their stuff isn't going to work. If this is really true that the virus is going to morph, and they claim that in order for the vaccine to work, it needs to be an exact match, except, of course, Nancy Cox, who once in a while has said, and I talked about it in my book, Foul, where she said, well, sometimes if it's a close match, it'll be okay. So how close is close enough? Is the vaccine going to be, even in their own mind, is it going to be good enough to protect against this morphed, very much stronger, more virulent virus? Because at that point, it won't match the virus that's in the vaccine anyway.
What about, for the last month, all these nursing associations and nurses and their husbands and wives have been calling me, sending me letters now. We've posted on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com where they're told 3 different things in different letters. You take the shot or you're fired. You take the shot or you wear a mask for 6 months or you're fired. Or we'd like you to take the shot. But it's all 3. And then now at schools, they're not even asking. They're just telling parents you've got to do it. They're now making the nurses take the regular seasonal flu shot. This is confirmed. It's now come out in mainstream news weeks after we covered it. And Obama does this military tactic of denying, so everybody kind of stands down, so our opposition can't articulate what's happening and build to resist. The polls show the majority of people don't want to be forced to take it and don't want to take it. But there's this whole kind of quiet, under-the-radar program, and I've talked to nurse after nurse and firefighter after firefighter. They tell them, you got to take this. Many have already been forced to take it at Seton hospitals here in Austin. And don't tell anybody we made you do this or you're fired. I mean, it's like a huge curtain of tyranny, and oppression is lowering over us.
I certainly hope that a lot of those people that heard that will be brave enough to maybe partner with several other people who were told the same things and come forward and expose that. Because now we're talking about American against American and neighbor against neighbor and even friend against friend doing these sorts of things. This really is tyrannical, those sorts of things. And people have got to be brave enough to be able to stand up and step out and say, and expose the people that are saying this, and that they can expose the persons who told them to say that, because then if finally we'll go far enough down into the rat hole, we'll find the rat, and who's giving these sort of orders and making this be that we have to take this medication and have one American have to be forcibly giving it to another.
I have studied the Rockefellers deeply, and I know you have as well, but so has Dr. Blaylock, and every researcher we have on has the same intel because we're just researching their own statements. The big private corporation that manages New York City that the Rockefellers set up, tied into 9/11, tied into the big vaccine makers, tied into all the key players. And I read Horowitz's affidavit. Remember, he predicted the anthrax attacks before they happened and then with precision said who did it and how. So, sometimes I take what he does as kind of, whoa, that's extreme. But then he's proven right down the road. So I've got to look at his and then I've done my own research, reading the affidavit where he's going to the FBI saying, here are the criminals, they did it. Very bold. Have you, read his affidavit? And what do you think of this whole racketeering operation that he says is going on?
I have read his affidavit. I have to say that I haven't studied it, and I haven't really connected all the dots. I do know that when I was reading through it, it seemed as though I did have questions of saying there seemed to be some gaps in some of the connections there, and that's my opinion. And again, I didn't go through and study every single one of those line item things, but I do believe that there's enough evidence there. There's enough evidence that somebody who is on our side of the equation, on our table, needs to sit up and take notice and follow through with some of the things that he's talking about. I mean, in any sort of a lawsuit of any kind, even if it's a car accident, there are certainly elements that have little missing links and some assumptions that can be made. And I do believe that that there's things there that do need to be investigated, no doubt.
I want to open the phones up specifically for questions on the flu, the level 6 pandemic declared when it's really not a pandemic, according to medical doctors we've talked to. They've changed the scale to call it a pandemic when it's not. I'd like you to speak to that, but I want to take calls, 1-800-259-9231, but only on the flu and the whole martial law situation, 1-800-259-9231. But doctor, specifically, and Ron Paul agrees, this is a medical tyranny. First, they say we're taking your rights for shadowy people in turbans in Central Asia, in Afghanistan. Then they go, oh, well, really, DHS and Homeland Security and Northcom are for the American people. And yeah, the Patriot Act is being used and non-terror related. And we don't need warrants anymore to take your blood at checkpoints or bust in your house. And, but that's not even good enough. It's perfect to then say everybody could have the flu. Everybody could be carrying it. And it's just a perfect excuse to further expand under UN control the takeover of nation states. And under level 6, we are under UN control right now. I mean, do you get what I'm saying here? That flu is the perfect thing to create the ultimate boogeyman?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm in total agreement, Alex, with everything that you just said. Because one thing has led to another. And the thing that bothers me about all of this is that, somebody's out there making those FEMA camps. Somebody's hammering nail into wood. Somebody is making those shots and giving them to people. Somebody is putting documents in place and signing their names. And who those somebodies are our neighbors, our friends, people we go to church with, people that are in our schools, our soccer teams. Why is it that people who are doing those things can't see what's happening and stop, and let's all band together, and it's really us Americans. There's 300 million of us and 550 of them. We've got the resistance. We've got the power of the people here. We've got numbers, but yet we have allowed that small set of 554 of them down in Washington, D.C., to pull all this wool over our eyes. I think it's really time that we all stand up and set aside our differences and say enough is enough, just like that 9/12 march. I mean, when I looked at that, to me, it really wasn't about what side of the equation you were on or what you were saying or where your politics happened to stand. It was the fact that people were willing to get out of their chairs, spend money, go to Washington, and make their voice be heard. And I think that on a state-by-state, community-by-community level, this is what we need to do.
Well, you're absolutely right. Doctor, what about adverse reactions from the flu trials? We've had nurses calling in saying that when they get the shots, everybody's arm basically becomes paralyzed. We have the internal CDC report about neurological problems linked to previous vaccines and possibly to this one. What's the intel on that now?
Well, I heard a report out of, it was a rumored report, but it was a report that came out of Oklahoma that said that there was a small hospital where the doctors all got together and said they weren't going to take it, and neither were the nurses, and they weren't going to give it to anybody because they had heard the same sort of things, that out of these clinical trials that there was a lot of adverse reactions that were not being reported at all. And, that's another thing, is if there's anybody out there that's been forced to take this by a nurse or paramedics or first responders, they need to be very vocal about it and let everybody else know the type of reactions that they had, because it's not going to be reported by the CDC. And, with YouTube that we have now and blogs and the Internet, there are ways that we can make our voice be heard. So I really think there's going to be a lot of problems with this. Now, the CDC has already loaded their side of the deck on that, though, Alex. They've already put up PowerPoint presentations and had other speakers who are from the CDC say, yes, of course, because we're going to have so many people vaccinated at the same time, the percentage risk of vaccination injury is going to go up. So we expect that, and that's going to be acceptable. Well, it's not acceptable.
Well, I've got a report here at Infowars.net from Steve Watson. Swine flu document lists sports arena as max vaccination center. And we've always known that was the plan. People ask, where are the FEMA camps? And Congress admits, and the New York Times admits, they've built certain FEMA camps, 6 big ones across the country, for millions of Americans. But they admit the sports stadiums, the local schools, these are the places they can roll barbed wire in hours, or they already have it, and lock everybody down. They're training the military for forced quarantine under level 6, but they're saying, well, we're not sure we're going to implement that. And they're now kind of floating the trial balloon of, oh, well, you don't have to take the shot, but you can't fly, you can't get on a bus, you can't drive to work, and you're going to have to wear a bracelet. Digital Angel, the Verichip company, got a patent. Their stock went up 200+% the other day. Where you have to take a chip to prove you've had it. That's AP reporting that. I mean, this is 1984, what we're seeing.